How did I end up here? Lying in your arms, watching city lights turn to stars.
Hello and welcome to the new save file compilation. It's exactly what you expect from the title, a compilation of all my new save file series videos in, well, one video. Honestly, New Save File, formerly known as Video Game Variety Hour, has been one of my personal favourite passion projects to work on over the past year and a bit, and even if it's not really been the most prominent series on the channel nor the biggest draw, I've enjoyed working on it nonetheless. Does this mark the end of the series? In its current state, yes, but I do plan to retool it at some point, so don't fret. It will return at some point and in some form in the future. If you gave the series a chance, then thank you so much, I really do appreciate it. But as for now, on with the show. If you're a part of the fighting game community, then there's a likely chance you know of Brawlhalla already, but if not, then let me explain briefly. Brawlhalla is a free-to-play platformer fighter akin to games like Super Smash Bros., but instead of already established IPs as playable characters, it features a cast of unique characters. Well, mostly, but we'll get to that. But yeah, Brawlhalla is pretty simple in concept, but you know, that's not always a bad thing. I first learned of Brawlhalla in 2018 when a friend suggested it for something else to play, and I've barely touched it since. It's not really a game I see myself putting endless hours into, but more so something I pick up every now and again for a quick distraction, which, despite how that may sound, I consider a good thing. Brawlhalla feels a lot simpler to something like Smash Bros. First off, every character has the same basic moveset, but what defines them is their specials, if you will. Randomly, weapons will spawn on the field. What you want are swords, which takes the form of the character's corresponding weapon, e.g. a trident for Mako, or claws for Asuri. And speaking of characters, or legends as they're called, some of the legends Brawlhalla has to offer in terms of their design are super cool. Take Orion, for example, a smithy sporting a Mecha Valkyrie suit. Simple explanation, but a damn cool design in my opinion. Or how about the previously mentioned Mako, a mutant shark from Atlantis wielding trident-like claws as her weapon. And yeah, it's a her. I was pretty shocked too when I read her bio on the website. Need it be mentioned the number of crossovers Brawlhalla has? Rayman, Steven Universe, Adventure Time, Shovel Knight, WWE, and most recently Kung Fu Panda. This game's pretty wild. A fun little distraction, if just for being wilded out at the many crossovers. This game needs no introduction. If you've been on the internet at any point in the last, let's see here, almost 7 years, then you've probably caught wind of a little indie horror series by the name of Five Nights at Freddy's, and this is where it all started, way back in 2014. The first FNAF is pretty iconic nowadays, being a sort of resurgence for indie horror, especially at a time where horror in video games was more of a meme than anything. Besides its lineage though, would you believe me that the first time I got to actually play the original 4 FNAF games was just last year in 2020, despite being a huge follower of the lore up until then? Well, that was the case. To an extent though, I don't think I was missing out. Don't get me wrong, the original FNAF is a great experience, but when compared to its other 3 sequels / prequels, it's probably the least engaging in terms of what it has to offer. Of course, it can be forgiven slightly, seeing as it was the first in the now legendary indie horror series, but even so. Now, don't get me wrong, the original FNAF is by no means bad. It's honestly still terrifying to play with the tension you feel from the approaching animatronics and how the difficulty scales of each night. It is actually good, but doesn't compare to the later entries, like FNAF 4, my favourite in the original lot. Friday Night Funkin', or FNF, is a cute little rhythm game created by Phantom Arcade and Evil Skater, with music composed by Kawaii Spirit. And to say this game's been a hit as of late would be quite the understatement. This game's popular as hell. You take control of Boyfriend in an attempt to rap battle against a number of opponents to keep your girlfriend, aka the girl who's perched on the stereo at the back. All in all, it's a very fun rhythm game with a great sense of challenge and really humiliates a person if they're bad at rhythm games, aka yours truly. You've most likely seen other creators play this game in the past, so as per usual, I'm late to the party in covering it, but whatever. Apart from actually being a generally good game, which this game is free by the way, I think the community aspect about the game is the best thing about it, and specifically, I mean the modding community. This game has a pretty significant modding community, which is insanely impressive considering FNF released only back in November 2020. Wait, November? I thought it was slightly more recent than that. Huh. Well, anyway, regarding the mods, a lot of them are damn good. I would show them myself, but I can barely run the game with my brick of a PC, so of course, any footage from here on out will be credited. As for some of the mods, there's the Witty mod, which is pretty well known and liked for its difficulty, which a lot of mods take pride in, and its music, specifically ballistic. There's also a Tricky mod, which had you rap battling against a character from the Madness Combat series, a pretty famous series of flash animations that I didn't know existed before coming across the Tricky mods, shamefully enough. There's also Salventi's Midfight Masters, which might be my favourite mod out of the lot, which has you rap battle against a nun who really wants you to go to their church, as things slowly go downhill from there as boyfriend proceeds to fold her like he does all of his opponents. It's a pretty interesting mod that I think you should check out for yourself. But knowing me, I've used gameplay as some of the late scenarios from the mod as background footage, so... But yeah, F1F is a really cool addition to the rhythm game community. I'm super excited for week 7, whenever that's going to happen. Pac-Man 99 is actually a last minute addition to this video, as it released only on the 7th of April, or earlier today, the 8th, at 2 AM for me, so... Anyway, so Pac-Man 99 is a battle royale type game, similar to Tetris 99, where instead of playing Tetris against 98 other players, you're playing Pac-Man. As seeing as Pac-Man is a better game than Tetris, in my humble opinion, I actually think this one's much better. Not to rag on Tetris too much of course, I just much prefer Pac-Man. It's a simple concept, but goddamn is it fun and addictive, as you would expect from this type of game. In the hour I was playing it for, I played around 20 consecutive games, or at least close to that. I was generally having so much fun that I fell into the trap of saying, just one more game for like 5 games in a row. Truthfully, I don't have a lot to say about this one. It's Pac-Man, what can be said that hasn't been said already? But that aside, all that I think is important here is that it's super fun to play and gets really intense the more players you outlast, making it more fun, as a result, so it's pretty standard for a battle royale game really. Split Second is probably the least well known game on here. For a summary of what it is real quick, Split Second is an arcade style racing game that was developed by BlackRock Studio and published by Disney Interactive Studios, surprisingly enough, where you compete for money and fame, at least in terms of the game's story. Split Second is a chaotic destruction based game, where you can use power plays to create changes in the tracks or obstacles for your opponents to avoid, in your efforts to take first place. Obviously, what Split Second can be most easily compared to is the Burnout franchise, in terms of all the previously mentioned chaotic destruction that takes place on the track. This game has been one that I've wanted to talk about here on this channel before, but never really found a place to or inspiration for a video on it, because overall I think Split Second's a really cool game. Much like Brawlhalla, however, it's not one I see myself sinking tons of hours into, but is one that I can easily pick up and play whenever I need a fun little distraction. And being a part of a genre I love so much, the racing genre, it's that much better of a time pass for me. Overall, while I don't have much to say about Split Second, all I can say is that it's a good time. And if you enjoy games like Burnout, then you'll definitely enjoy this one. It might be a lot simpler in comparison, but complexity isn't everything. Hot Shot Racing is an arcade style racing game developed by Sumo Nottingham and Lucky Mountain Games, and oh my god is it fun. Being the epitome of a love letter to classic arcade races, most notably ones like Ridge Racer, Daytona USA, and Outrun 2, Hot Shot Racing is what would happen if you took those games and, well, released them nowadays. I'll tell you, I was completely hooked playing this game, even though initially I was a little hesitant going in, knowing what I know about arcade-like games and their typically archaic design and or difficulty. But as soon as I chose to bite the bullet, I immediately regretted holding off for so long. The first thing that caught my eye, or my ears rather, was the music. Hot damn does this game have a great soundtrack. So energetic, so thrilling, it's all so good and so fitting for such a game. The gameplay speaks for itself, it's all tight, it's all very responsive. It all feels good, so no complaints from me there. Plus the PS1 style graphics add to the game's charm I feel. Like, this game could fit perfectly on a PS1, and that's by no means a bad thing. If there is one complaint I could throw at the game, however, it's the rubber banding AI. Now, sure, rubber banding, or fake racing, was commonplace in arcade races way back when, so Hot Shot Racing is super faithful in that regard, but it's something I don't appreciate, so I thought it needed mentioned here. But, aside from that, Hot Shot Racing is a very entertaining racer that I think will satiate that desire you may have if you're looking for something new in the racing genre. Or old, I suppose. Out of all the games I've ever talked about on this channel, I don't think any of them have had as much charm as Rain on Your Parade, and I've talked about Animal Crossing before, so that's really saying something. When I was looking for games to include in this video, this game caught my eye for how charming it looked in the provided screenshots. That's all that was needed. For some context real quick, developed by Unbound Creation, in Rain on Your Parade you take control of a cloud and, well, rain on people. There are other tasks you're given to do as well, such as setting stuff on fire, herding sheep into a pen, or going full on Metal Gear Solid for one level, but what you're generally doing is in the title of the game itself. Simple premise, but I think that works in its favour. The charm of the game not only comes in the form of the concept, but the overall presentation and writing. Presentation wise, it's akin to a sort of diorama, if anything. I mean, just look at it. You're a cardboard cloud hanging from some strings. It's so adorable. And as for the writing, it's absolutely on point. It mostly relies on fourth wall breaking comedy, but I love that form of comedy, so I had no problem at all with that. There's also a lot of referential humour, like the previously mentioned Metal Gear Solid like level, and even a level referencing The Office. I've never seen The Office actually, but I got a kick out of it anyway. Also, this moment really made me laugh. If there's one way to describe this game, it's charming, of course. Its overly cutesy nature is sure to bring a smile to your face, and it's the perfect game to just sit down and play for a little while if you're having a bad day. Hyperscape has been something of a recent fascination for me. Suggested to me as something else to play by my good friend It's Lil Stick, Hyperscape, developed by Ubisoft, is a free-to-play FPS Battle Royale game that released in 2020, and appears to be quite an underground one too. Well, that or marketing for this game upon release was limited, or I'm just ignorant, but either way. You may be expecting me to talk about how good Hyperscape is as a Battle Royale in the heavily flooded genre here, but nope, all my time, or most of it playing Hyperscape so far, has been spent playing the deathmatch mode. If I do have to talk about the Battle Royale aspect here though, it's pretty much your standard Battle Royale. You land, you pick up weapons, you eliminate opponents, etc. However, what makes Hyperscape unique is its hacks, or rather abilities. Abilities are obtained through the same means as weapons, and their function depends on what you've picked up, e.g. wall, which, well, creates a wall in front of you to block incoming fire. These are pretty interesting in all fairness, but I just want to talk about deathmatch already. If you've never played other shooters before, like Call of Duty or even Overwatch, then essentially the objective of deathmatch is to reach a certain number of eliminations, in Hyperscape's case 50, or have more eliminations than the enemy team when the timer expires. It's standard, by no means revolutionary or because of how commonplace the mode generally is across the shooter genre, but I think it's a lot of fun in Hyperscape honestly. Then again, that may be because it's my first proper exposure to the said game mode that isn't in Overwatch, but still. I've been playing this game a lot alongside my friends, and that's probably why I've been enjoying it so much. Not to disregard what it has going for it already. I mean, after all, gaming is just more fun with friends, you know? "51 World War Games is the epitome of casual gaming, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Be a sort of minigame collection host to, you guessed it, 51 World War Games, there is obviously a lot of variety to choose from here, whether that be well-known classics like chess, Connect 4 or even darts, to maybe lesser known games like Hare and Hounds, Hanafuda or Mancala. There's truly a lot of interesting variety to choose from here, and honestly, I never expected to have so much fun with a game like this. You take one look at this game and see it as something you play for 5 minutes at a time, and then go back to doing whatever it was you were doing, and yeah, that's definitely the case, but I found myself playing this game for hours on end, a number of times. Should they be games I was familiar with or was playing for the first time? I was having a lot of fun, and I'm confident that I will continue to have fun with it in future. A game that primarily appeals to the casual audience, but that doesn't matter in the slightest. Casual, hardcore, so long as you're having fun. That's all that matters, and 51 World War Games is a prime example of that. I was probably most excited to play this one out of all the games on here in all honesty. Through my frequent viewings of the Xbox Game Pass library, Crosscode once caught my eye as something I may like. Mostly because of the anime-esque art style, but nevertheless. However, I never followed through with that interest and didn't end up playing it until recently, thanks to MythMu's coverage on it. Side tangent here real quick. Myth, I love your stuff man, truly. But please make some new thumbnails, they can start to look a little samey after a while. Anyway, my tangent about another content creator stuff aside, developed by Radical Fish Games, Crosscode is an action role-playing game with a top-down perspective set in the distant future of XXXX, I don't know. The first thing you're bound to notice about Crosscode is its absolutely gorgeous art style, reminiscent of 16-bit Super NES style games. Combined with the anime aesthetic it's got going on, it works wonders. Just look at it. You take control of Leah as she plays a fictional MMORPG known as Crossworlds, and oh god, I'm getting Sword Art Online vibes. Anyhow, what I enjoy most about Crosscode, other than its art style, is its gameplay. Crosscodes is an RPG that plays like an MMORPG. Of course, it's not actually an MMO, it's primarily single player, but it has the overall feel of an MMORPG, if that makes sense though. What I'm trying to say here is that I really appreciate it. And to talk more on the gameplay, the combat system. Crosscode's combat system is unlike anything I've ever seen in games I've played, being a simple but also surprisingly intricate battle system that is, admittedly, a little difficult to get a hold of at first. But it's the type of combat system that you know is going to be super fun to master, and that is amazing. Reminds me of XE2 to some extent. Characters are super likeable and colourful too, by the way, so it reminds me even more of XE2. Okay, I'll stop now. Through the time I spent playing Crosscode, I had a great time, and I'm for sure going to continue it in my free time after this video. I'm glad I finally gave it a shot. Oh, by the way, according to How Long to Beat, Crosscode is a longer game than Cyberpunk 2077 by around 19 hours, so... Thought that a new Pokemon Snap game would release, let alone 20 years later. 2021 has just been the year of video game series comebacks. I briefly talked about new Pokemon Snap in the past in my views of recent video game news video, saying how it looked like everything I've ever wanted out of a Pokemon game. So you can imagine that I snagged it on release day, right? Well, not quite. I got it just over a week later actually, but that aside, to say it met my expectations would be quite the understatement. But first, what is new Pokemon Snap exactly? Well, it's a follow-up to the original Pokemon Snap, released in 1999, which was a game where you rack up points by taking pictures of Pokemon in an on-rail shooter type of gameplay approach. In other words, it's photography but with Pokemon. It's a very simple premise in all honesty, but it's since turned into a cult classic, so it's obviously struck a chord with a lot of people. And so, over 20 years later, a new Pokemon Snap game, appropriately titled New Pokemon Snap, released, which is pretty much the same thing, but better. Based in the Lental region, there's somewhat of a story here revolving around the Lunar phenomenon that the region is known for. It's a surprisingly decent story. Nothing too complex obviously, but one that puts a focus on the mystery of the phenomenon. I don't want to spoil anything in particular about the happenings in the story, but I'll just say that being surprised by what Illumina Pokemon you'll be taking pics of next is part of the fun. I kid you not when I say that this is probably one of my favourite games of the year so far. How much that means, I'm not too sure considering how many new games I actually buy a year. But nevertheless, new Pokemon Snap not only met my expectations, but greatly exceeded them. A little bit about me real quick. I've always had a passing interest in photography, but as a passing interest may suggest, it was never something I actively pursued. So with that in mind, there being a game where I could put said interest into practice, and one where you're taking pictures of Pokemon no less, it was like a match made in heaven. New Pokemon Snap is genuinely a lot of fun, and it's also super relaxing too. Just being able to kick back and take interesting pictures in a world full of amazing and fascinating creatures speaks for itself. And one of the best parts about it is discovering new Pokemon to snap pictures of. No matter how many times I've seen these Pokemon in my almost 11 years of being a fan, I was always super excited when I came across a new one I hadn't previously seen in said location, and that's just so cool. For someone who's arguably a little jaded when it comes to Pokemon now, in some senses, that's really saying something. There are so many secrets to discover, whether that be seeing how many Pokemon interact with each other in different ways because of how your actions, or again, just getting to see new Pokemon in general. I still have a lot to do, and for a game like Pokemon Snap, which at first glance may not seem to offer too much on the surface, it's kind of incredible. I realise that new Pokemon Snap being a game that's heavily casual orientated may be a hard sell for some, as are most of the Pokemon game spin-offs, but it's one that's most definitely worth your time if you just need a nice little distraction for 10 to 20 minutes. Now that's not to say it won't keep you hooked. Not to mention the visuals of course. Have you seen these? Like, wow, they're gorgeous. This is pretty much what people want from the main series Pokemon games, but I don't want to get into that topic right now, so I'll just stop on my head. A surprising contender for my favourite game of the year in some regards, but also expected in others. New Pokemon Snap is a fantastic game. Right off the bat, can I just say how disappointed I am that I probably won't ever get a chance to play this game in VR. However, considering a few personal issues I ran into while playing this game that we'll elaborate on later, maybe that's for the best. But anyway, short and to the point, Tetris Effect is an experience that will leave you saying, I didn't know Tetris could make me feel this way. You can see it all on the screen right now. This game is hypnotizing. Sure, Tetris Effect is just Tetris, the standard formula we all know and love, where you fill lines with random Tetronimos to eliminate them and make sure you don't reach the top. So it's obviously nothing new, but it's the presentation that will really keep a hold of you. It's just so hypnotic. It's a little difficult for me to get across here how great Effect's presentation is, both in terms of visuals, sound design and music. So it's something I recommend you play for yourself, even if just for 5 minutes. It's on Game Pass, which is how I played it, so if you have that, then it's totally worth your time. But if not, then I don't know, buy it. It's a much better alternative to LSD or whatever. To think, if I had a VR headset, I'd probably be losing my mind even more over how visually amazing Effect is, but as I mentioned at the beginning of this part, it's obviously best I don't, because a few times while playing it I experienced headaches and or eye strain as a result of how intense the presentation can get sometimes, and I don't even suffer from photosensitivity or anything like that. Maybe it's because my attention was unbreaking and I hadn't taken enough breaks, something I recommend you do when it comes to this level of visual intensity, but even so, I wanted to mention that here briefly. That aside, Tetris Effect Connected is a casual experience with a captivating and addictive gameplay loop. I mean, it's Tetris after all, and Tetris is always fun. Crystals is... This one's a tricky one for me, so allow me to explain why. Crystals is an RPG that follows Crystal, this young girl who randomly obtains the ability to see into both the past and future. An interesting concept, and one that can spawn some interesting storytelling. Now, as a fan of RPGs, you think I love this game, right? Well, I do like it. In fact, there are a lot of aspects I love about it, but it has a couple of quirks I'm not too fond of. But first, let me tell you what I do like. Firstly, I just adore this game's art style. It's very reminiscent of a pop-up book and gives me vibes of Ruby x Paper Mario, which is not something I ever knew I wanted, but now that I have it, I'm eternally grateful. Secondly, Crystals has such beautiful music. The main form of instrumentation is the piano, and it's just so good. It's the type of music you can just put on in the background and relax to, you know? And thirdly, I really like the battle system it has. Basically, the time travel aspect of the story comes into play in battle too, where depending on which side the enemies are, you can either send them into the past or the future. It sounds simple, but with some of the abilities that your party members have, such as water damage causing rust in the future, it really encourages strategizing, and that's so cool. Really, Crystals has a lot going for it, but as I mentioned, it has some quirks that I'm not too fond of, which I'm going to go over now. So even though I'm only like 2 hours in so far, the story hasn't really hooked me. It's a little too basic and rushed. I mean, Crystal just kind of gets her powers, there's no real major build up, there's no interesting reason other than it's her destiny. It just kind of rushes itself for the sake of getting things moving. Now, there's nothing wrong with wanting to get things moving of course, but if you're going to sacrifice an aspect of RPGs that they're synonymous for, the story, then maybe you need to reconsider your priorities. And to add on to that more, Crystal's pacing is odd. It throws you right into the deep end at the very start of the game, immediately putting you into a battle which, sure, you're not left to your own devices, you're given a tutorial, but afterwards, the game then just kind of drags you back into Shadow Wars where you then get what is the prologue essentially. This type of thing has been done before in other games, sure, but it's not a form of pacing that I am a fan of, and I would have just preferred if it saved the combat for later on, which isn't all that far off in reality. And when it comes to combat, oh boy, I already mentioned how I really like the battle system, but there's a certain quirk about it that bothers me, the random encounters. By themselves, I don't mind random encounters, I love Pokemon after all, but it takes forever to get into the battle itself. I timed it. It takes 17 seconds to load in and 13 seconds to load out of the battle. I understand that it's loading in an entirely different scenario, but over time, this really adds up and gets to you, made worse by the fact the encounter rate is maybe a little too frequent? I don't know, I feel like a failsafe could have been put in place for this where the encounter rate was taken down a few notches. Maybe the load times are not consistent, maybe they're slightly better on other platforms, but I'm talking about my personal experience with the game here, and it was a major problem for me. Realising how often I would probably have to put up with this, it kind of killed my motivation to play onwards. As I stated, there's a lot of things I love about the game, but with the lack of a hook and optimization, I don't feel compelled to play more, you know? That's a real shame, I will be completely honest. This is probably the most negative I've ever been on this channel, wow. I'm sorry Crystals, I think you're a decent game, but one I don't see myself picking up again unfortunately. From one RPG that I was pretty down on to one that I absolutely just adore, Yakuza Like a Dragon is truly such an amazing game. And fun fact real quick, Like a Dragon is actually my first Yakuza game. And you know, personally, I don't think I could have had a better start. And hey, maybe a lot of other people think that too, considering the reception Like a Dragon got then. Huh? Oh, I thought it was just Steve Benton in that. Well, okay then. Yakuza Like a Dragon is a sort of spin-off to the main Yakuza series, and it has us follow Ichiban Kasuga. And not to waste too much time here with the story overview, he gets betrayed by his former clan boss and proceeds to uncover the reason behind his betrayal, all the while befriending other playable characters. Because yes, as previously mentioned, Like a Dragon is an RPG where Kasuga and his party of 4 fight in real-time battles with RPG mechanics, seemed to like some Dragon Quest, which is really fitting seeing as Kazuka is obsessed with DQ. I don't see the fascination, but I'm going to start digging myself a hole here to avoid pissing off any DQ fans who may be watching. To get straight to the point here, it's seriously one of the most fun RPGs I think I've ever played, and it really shines with its constantly evolving narrative and superb character writing. I've mentioned this many times before, but I'm someone who values character over story any day. And that's not to say that the story of a game isn't still important to me, just as I made clear in the Crystal segment prior. And you know, lucky for me, Like a Dragon has both character and story right down to a T. This might be quite the bold take from me, but Like a Dragon might have my absolute favourite cast of RPG party members, period. And yes, that does mean they've overtaken the XC2 cast as my favourite, so yeah, that means something. To go over the party members real quick. First, there's Ichiban Kasuga, who is a strong-willed, lovable dork who's obsessed with Dragon Quest, as I mentioned. Koichi Adachi, an ex-detective who is just badass in its own right. Yu Namba, a homeless man and ex-nurse who will kick your ass with an umbrella. And finally, Seiko Makoda, who is a shrewd, painfully blunt woman, especially at the behest of the rest of the party most of the time. It's really such an amazing and entertaining cast of characters that you fall in love immediately, whether that be for just one character or the chemistry between them. Not only do the characters feel real, but the in-game world of Japan feels so alive too, with so much to see and do, having plenty of fun little side activities, and character-filled moments throughout that you'll just stumble into sometimes, which is par for the course for the Yakuza series from my understanding. The game also looks really good too, being beautifully animated in the cinematic cutscenes, a character design that really stands out when it needs to matter. The in-game cutscenes can look a little rough sometimes with certain character models, but I wouldn't at all say that's something that gets in the way of my enjoyment of the game. I guess if there was one thing I had an issue with, however, it's how the game can gauge your progress sometimes for what feels like padding. See, occasionally, the game will not let you proceed onwards until you've kitted out your party with gear and such. Now, in a way, I appreciate this because it's a nice way of the game saying, hey, this upcoming area may be difficult, so you want to be prepared. But at the same time, being gated like that sort of mitigates the overall freedom you've had up until that point. Being gated is an issue I have with XT2 and it's an issue I have here, so as you can imagine, there are no exceptions. But that one issue aside, my time with Like a Dragon has been amazing. I really have enjoyed the overwhelming majority of it so far, and I definitely want to continue. It's full of personality, it's written super well, most importantly, it's fun. Yakuza Like a Dragon is a remarkable game. I'm so glad that I finally got to check it out. Overcooked. Maybe you've heard of this little series before, but if not, allow me. Developed by Ghost Town Games and published by Team 17, Overcooked is a very chaotic, coordination-based cooking simulator that puts you in control of one of many cute little chefs as you try to deliver orders shown at the top left of the screen, along with the ingredients required to make them. I first heard of Overcooked a few years back, and though I don't exactly recall what I did, I know that my first exposure to it was through the Runaway guys when they did their collab for it back in 2020, and oh Christ, it's been over a year and a half since then. Passion of Time continues to be a cool mistress. My existential dread aside, however, Overcooked looked to be really fun, and while I don't go out my way to go and buy a copy right away, I managed to wait long enough to play Overcooked 2, released in August of 2018, in like December 2021. Yeah. But hey, maybe that was a good thing, because when I finally did, I got to play with my good friends, Stick, Nova Explains, and Akize. And much like with Overwatch, it was that aspect of playing with friends that really made Overcooked 2 for me. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying nor implying the game of Overcooked 2 itself is bad, not at all, because it's actually really good, having that sense of chaos that shines through, thanks to its time-based gameplay and, excuse the pun here, but it all blends really well when you play with each other. I wouldn't say you absolutely have to play Overcooked 2 with people to get enjoyment out of it, but on your own, it kind of loses some of that magic, you know. I think Kinikarus put it best when he said,
Overcooked somehow manages to mix stressful and slow at the same time. Maybe slow isn't the right word. Restrictive, perhaps?
There's not too much to say about Overcooked 2, honestly, but if there was anything negative I had to say, it's that the online multiplayer can be a bit frustrating with lag and the like, so you're much better off playing it in person. Though if how the world continues to be, if playing online is your only option, then it's fine enough as is. Plus, hey, I think it's kind of hard to say anything bad about Overcooked 2, given all the little chefs it offers you and how they're all just so adorable. I play as the octopus for most of my time. I call him the Blub Blub King. Spoilers, I guess, but out of all the games in this video, Deep Milk Galactic is probably the one I think I'd least be like to play under normal circumstances because of how, from a glance, it doesn't really look like my type of game. But, as they say, appearances can be deceiving. Developed by Ghost Ship Games and published by Coffee Stain Publishing, Deep Rock Galactic was released in May of 2020 after spending like 2 years in early access. Deep Rock happens to be a co-op FPS PvE game that has swarms of enemies to take down and plenty of resources to mine, so in that sense, you could say it bears some resemblance to Minecraft. Objectives are kind of straightforward, having you mine minerals, stealing alien eggs of all things, or just eliminating swarms of enemies. There are also ones where you retrieve lost equipment, but these are far less common to my knowledge. It's honestly a pretty fun game, also having a great sense of humour to it, namely for the fact you'll play as one of 4 dwarves throughout, or residing in a space colony. That alone is funny enough to me, but there are plenty of other great examples of humour throughout, like some of the PSAs that appear on your terminal in your spawn room on a colony, or some of the quips the dwarves yell while you're on your mission. It's all good stuff. By the way, I should say that there are 4 classes of dwarves to pick from: the engineer, the gunner, the driller, and the scout. During my time playing Deep Rock so far, I've been playing as the gunner. Not that I chose to or anything, more because everyone else had already chosen their roles before I started playing. But even so, I just can't see myself switching now because of how much you can just flatten in your way thanks to the minigun the class comes with. It's a lot of fun. Again, this is a game I played with friends, the same friends that I played with for Overcooked 2 in fact, so shout out to the boys for being there with me to play it. I said at the beginning that Deep Rock didn't look like my kind of game at a glance, but that's only because of the art style, having this rough polygonal look to it in areas. But I did warm up to it over time, however, and now I actually like it, and I think it works for this type of game. Don't judge a book by its cover, they say, and yeah, that holds true here. Piku Niku is a strange one. I don't mean the circumstances surrounding the game itself or anything like that, but rather what the game is. Developed by Sectordub and published by Devolver Digital, yeah, me telling you Devolver Digital is the publisher should be enough already if you know anything about them at all. But nevertheless, released in January 2019, Piku Niku is a puzzle game that puts you in control of this thing, and you must solve these puzzles to venture further into the game. Just gonna say that right, if not for it being a puzzle game or whatever, I think the absolute absurdity of Piku Niku is what's gonna draw you to it. I mean, this game's just bizarre, dude, and I play Calamari Damacy, so that's really saying something. So for this thing you're controlling, you have a few ways of solving puzzles: kicking, jumping, or using one of your legs to grab onto hooks and swing. And if there's anything at all I can praise, not as I haven't already, it's how satisfying a jump is to pull off and land. There's weight to it, it's easy to grasp, and it's just fun to use over and over again because of how silly it looks. And of course, to accompany its absurd visuals, Piku Niku also has great writing, so look, I'll be honest, for as entertained and in disbelief that I was seeing the absolute absurdity of Piku Niku unfold in front of me, gameplay, visuals, characters and all, I honestly don't think I'm going to be picking it up again. That's nothing against the game, it's more of a me thing. It's just too bloody weird for me to casually consume, you know? And again, I'm speaking as someone who's played Calamari Damacy, so yeah. But hey, if what I've said or what you've been seeing on screen has piqued your interest at all, then I recommend you have at the weird and wacky world that is Piku Niku. Not me though, I think I'm going to play something a little more grounded next time. When it comes to roguelikes, what games immediately come to mind for you? Maybe something like Hades, or The Binding of Isaac, Dead Cells, or even Crypto Necrodancer perhaps? Well, the Spelunky series happens to be one of the early examples of the modern roguelike formula. First released in December 2008, eventually get a sequel almost 12 years later in September 2020, Spelunky 2. Developed by Mossmouth and Blipworks and published by Mossmouth, Spelunky 2 maintains everything that made the original so great, being a 2D platforming game that incorporates procedural generation in the form of randomly generated cave designs that change every time you play or respawn, making for a different experience each time. A lot of people have talked about this in the past when talking about roguelikes, but this kind of design is what makes them so addictive. Getting to see something new each time and hope that it will yield different results, encouraging you to continue on, despite there being no guarantee of success. That is excellent game design, and Spelunky 2 is no exception. In Spelunky 2 you control Anna, and the main objective is to collect treasure and venture through the cave systems in order to find your family who went missing years ago in the same caves. Along the way, you'll get items like bombs you can use to clear paths, and rope that you can use to climb up or to safely lower yourself down because, yeah, there's fall damage. In fact, a lot of things can kill you here, so best be careful because these are dangerous caves indeed. Even though I'm absolute garbage at Spelunky 2 and the furthest I could only manage to get was level 1-3, I had so much fun playing it. I wouldn't say it was as addictive for me as Hades was, but it definitely kept my attention for as long as I did play it, and I eventually even had to force myself away from it, so yeah, I think that's endorsement enough. I understand the random nature of roguelikes may be a deterrent to some, not being able to plan ahead or learn from their mistakes in some senses, That I get, but I think the offering of an entirely new / unique experience each time is a good enough incentive, and could provide for great talking points with your friends as you discuss what you saw and what they did. A discussion game, if you will. Okay, maybe not on a level of discussion like something like Metal Gear Solid, where every cutscene seemingly requires its own roundtable discussion, but not everything needs to be complicated. Talking about EA in a positive light is an extremely rare thing to do, and I'm about to do just that. Well, not quite, because EA are only the publishers of Unravel, with Coldwood Interactive and Coldwood Interactive AB being the actual development studios behind it. But EA's name being on anything in any way more than often taints it from the get-go, but not this time around, unfortunately. Released in February 2016, the year where everything started going to crap, Unravel is a puzzle platforming game where you control this cute little yarn creature simply known as Yarny, as you venture through a variety of environments in search of these yarn badges, which unlock more of the story, both literally and figuratively, for you to most likely cry out when you get to the end. Yeah, it definitely has that kind of story feel to it, no pun intended. For the time I gave myself to play Unravel, I found it to be a very fun feel-good game. Again, no pun intended. See, the puzzle aspect of the game comes into play when you remember that Yarny is a single-stranded yarn pulled from a yarn ball, meaning it only has so much yarn to work with until you won't be able to move any longer. But don't fret, because along the way you'll find more balls of yarn to replenish your yarn supply. And other than puzzles being movement-based, kinda, a lot of them require experimentation with the physics of the game in order to solve them, making for some really interesting and most importantly, fun puzzles to solve. There's also the matter of the world you're in. See, you're just a tiny yarn creature exploring a big world, making otherwise everyday objects feel huge in comparison, and I absolutely love that kind of premise. Having said that, it makes me wonder if I'd enjoy the Pikmin series. I never did play any of those. Anyway, back to what I was saying. That premise of everything around you being bigger because of a different perspective is the kind of thing that would also work well in a horror setting, which might be a certain game later on that capitalizes on that, but that's for later. As for now, don't worry, Unravel is not some kind of subversive horror game where it draws you in at first and then hits you like a freight train halfway through. No, not at all. At least, I don't think it's so, anyway. No, I'm kidding. As I said, it's a wholesome feel-good game. Unravel is also a very beautiful game as well. Seriously, if you've just kind of been passively listening for the past few minutes, then look up and see what this game has to offer you. YouTube video compression will definitely mess with the visual flair a little, but even so, trust me when I say that this is a really pretty looking game. Altogether, Unravel is an amazing little indie game that Coldwood Interactive really poured their hearts into, and in the first 5 minutes of the game alone, you can really tell. First impressions this series may be about, but from them alone, Unravel is for sure a work of art. From one work of art to another form of art, has your dream job ever been to become a dog photographer? Well, if that's the case, then Paparazzi is just the game for you. Released literally a month ago at the time of recording my audio here, developed by Sunday Month and published by Kit Fox Games, Paparazzi is a game where you, well, take photos of dogs and yeah, that's about it really. Okay, well, not quite. Your main goal is to garner a large social media following and yeah, honestly I'm struggling here. Truth be told, I do love the idea of this game as a sort of very wholesome feel-good experience, more so than Unravel actually, and as something you can pick up and play when you need a little cheering up, you know. And yeah, it's a very cute experience, even pulling on my heartstrings slightly at just how carefree you are in this game. It's a life a lot of strive for, I think. Plus, again, in concept, taking pictures of dogs is exceptionally wholesome, especially with how polygonal all these dogs are, which just adds to the charm of the game I feel, because, you know, who doesn't like dogs? Well, story time here real quick. I actually used to be afraid of dogs for the longest time because of an incident as a child where I got chased by a fairly aggressively playful one. Fortunately, I wasn't hurt, but as you can imagine, it was a terrifying experience for me as a child. Nowadays, however, I love dogs. I don't own one myself, I'm more of a cat person in that regard, but nonetheless, I do love them now, especially huskies. I think they're beautiful. Sorry about that tangent there, but back to the subject at hand. With how casual of an experience Paparazzi is and how it's aimed towards a very specific audience, a fairly niche one at that, it's kind of a hard sell, I will admit. Admittedly, unless for my love of new Pokemon Snap or for the existence of new save file, I probably wouldn't have played this game otherwise, but seeing as I have now, I'll be honest and say that I don't think my time was wasted. I much appreciate the wholesome experience, and hey, it's always there if I want something to unwind to or need cheering up, so hey, there's something. This game's a weird one, huh? First released in early access in April of 2019, on April 1st no less, later fully released in April 2021, again on April 1st, I love the commitment there. Tabs was developed and published by Landfall Games, and from the gameplay you're seeing in the background alone, You can already tell what kind of game Tabs is. If you've got no idea what you're looking at, however, which I can't say I really blame you, Tabs is supposed to be a parody of the battle simulator genre, a genre that includes games like itself, but it's also a strategy game, a genre that includes games like the Civilization series, Gears Tactics, and Rock of Ages. Yeah, something like that looks like this is a strategy game, would you believe it? And for the cherry on top of the cake, it also has ragdoll physics. Lovely. But anyway, in Tabs, your objective is to build a team, red, that will take down the enemy team, blue, in either the campaign or sandbox mode. The only difference between the two is that the sandbox mode has no monetary limit to how many or what units you can place, while the campaign obviously does have a monetary limit. So if you are playing the campaign mode, there is some thought you need to put into what units you think will best suit the current situation, hence the strategy part. If I'm recalling correctly, Tabs is the first game of its particular genre that I've played, the unit building type I mean. Unless you count Fire Emblem Heroes, but I don't know if I do or don't, so moving on. But despite my inexperience, I thought I was pretty okay at it, and I had a lot of fun with what I did play as well. Besides, even if I failed miserably, the game made me laugh with its over-the-top ragdoll physics. Whether it be my main getting decked to the face with a rock or seeing a mammoth tear through the opposition by just swinging itself about, Tabs was hugely entertaining for me for just how silly it was. Humor's subjective, I know that, but how can you not laugh at stuff like this? And you know, that's not to say that Tabs sells itself for the stupidity of the premise alone, because the strategy aspect of the game will keep you invested, I think, and there's definitely nothing wrong with something that gets you thinking, even if the hilarity is about to derail your train of thought. It's quite the enigma in that sense. It's like the devs are playing 5D psychological chess with us or something. Quite the tonal shift, huh? Little Nightmares is only the third horror game I'm talking about in this channel, the first being DDLC and the second being FNAF 1, and for someone like me who's very much into the horror genre, that's quite odd, wouldn't you say? Considering I own the Resident Evil 2 remake as well, it's even more strange. Sometime soon, hopefully. Anyway, developed by Tarsier Studios and published by Bandai Namco Entertainment, released in 2017, Little Nightmares is a puzzle platformer much like Unravel, just not. Very much not. If you didn't know or just weren't listening about 2 paragraphs ago, Little Nightmares is a horror game, and I alluded to it earlier, but essentially Unravel's premise of you being a small fish in a big pond is also the case here, used to its full effect to how you'd expect it to be in a horror setting. Okay, that's not all Little Nightmares has going for it, but it's what stuck out to me most while playing in how effective the environments were in making you feel small and helpless on a lot of occasions. And for someone like me, who is kind of a jaded horror fan, only really finding interest in psychological horror, I loved that feeling. Funny story actually, on the topic of psychological horror, the game Visage was at one point a shoo-in for this video, but that ended up getting replaced by Unravel when I suddenly lost interest in the idea of playing it. I don't know why exactly I lost interest, I kind of just did. And actually, Little Nightmares wasn't originally supposed to be here either. Instead, I was going to be talking about Unsighted. But for whatever reason, the game just didn't want to start, no matter how many times I tried on my Xbox One, so yeah, I eventually replaced it with Little Nightmares. Gameplay-wise, you're in control of this mysterious character known as Six, a close to starving little girl who must escape this place called the Moor. What is the Moor, you ask? Well, so here's the thing. I know the answer to that, and that's because I remember watching Markiplier's playthrough of it back when it first came out, so of course, I obviously know what's to come as well, but I don't think that matters. Even when I recognised the location, that was the problem. I recognised the location and knew it was about to follow. The fear of the unknown is probably the strongest fear out there, not knowing what to expect and what's to come and all. But if done right, a horror game can make you dread knowing what's coming next. And Little Nightmares, intentionally or not, does that super well. Sure, I went from watching it to then playing it a few years later, as opposed to this just being a second playthrough, but personally, I still found it terrifying. That might only be because I have a better understanding of what makes effective horror now, but nevertheless. I'm really glad I finally got to play Little Nightmares. I claimed it off gold maybe a year back or something, and I just didn't touch it. And when I finally got to it, I found it already started firing with my sisters on it, for when I lent her my Xbox once, so yeah, that was something, but regardless, I loved playing what I did of Little Nightmares. I've said it a few times with games that I featured in the series, but I really mean it this time. I can't wait to continue Little Nightmares when I get the chance next. I deliberately stayed vague with this one because, even though this is kind of hypocritical of me to say given what I've said about my history with Little Nightmares, I do think it's best if you experience it for yourself. Trust me when I say, Little Nightmares is well worth your time, and maybe one day I hope to give it a proper review. It'd only be the second horror game to receive that kind of treatment. This is the video first, it seems, as this series should be about. The second and not the last roguelike game to appear in this series, wink wink, developed by Thomas Moonkang and published by Humble Bundle, released in March of 2020. One Step from Eden puts you in control of a number of characters, though at the beginning you can only choose from one character, and your objective is to make it all the way to this place called Eden. Some fabled place I don't really know, I didn't get that far. One Step from Eden, along with being a roguelike, is also an action and deck building game, making it my first deck building game. It plays similar to the Mega Man Battle Network series, and if that's the case, I need to go play that ASAP because One Step from Eden is so fun to play. Helped along by the roguelike philosophy that I explained with Spelunky 2 and New Safe L4, where I hope you'll succeed the next time around encourages you to continue on, the fast-paced, intense battle gameplay of Eden is dangerously addicting. A perfect concoction of addiction, really. Before a battle, you are given a chance to arrange your deck, getting to choose from a variety of cards that have a variety of effects, ranging from more head-on attacks that do immediate damage, or cards that push foes back to create space between you two, potentially affecting the course of the battle. And when you get into the battle, you aren't just standing still, waiting for your turn to choose a card. No, it's a lot more frantic than that, thankfully. Basically, you have to be on the move pretty much constantly, thinking about your position and considering the enemy's position in order to avoid their attacks and land your own. It can get pretty hectic at times, and I love it for that fact alone. I'll be honest, when it comes to actually building my deck, I'm kinda monkey-brained about it, just going with what I think looks good and never really thinking about an actual strategy. But even so, I was still enjoying the hell out of it. Not to mention as well, I love the pixel art style of Eden. I think it looks really nice and it works for this type of game, being simplistic enough to not be too distracting and while you focus on other things, i.e. the gameplay. Of course, the art style is also a callback to Battle Network, so there's that as well. It's also got really good music too, honestly. I was stuck on a title screen just listening to the music for about 20 minutes or so for the first time I booted it up. I just got lost in it. And fun fact here, while doing some research for this, I found out that the name of the game, One Step from Eden, is apparently a reference to The World Ends With You, released in 2007, which Eden's theme and feel was also heavily influenced by. I never played The World Ends With You, the original nor the enhanced port for the Switch, but after hearing that, it's hard to say I'm not at least intrigued now. Oh yeah, front, I was kind of worried about playing Eden first, given how, from the screenshots alone, it suggested that it was just your average RTS deck building game, akin to something like Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories and Metal Gear Acid, games I haven't exactly heard glowing praises for, or even Yu-Gi-Oh, which I'm sorry, I just don't like. So having said that, I was pretty concerned, but obviously that concern turned out to be unwarranted because I ended up loving One Step from Eden. As the old adage goes, don't judge a book by its cover, and you know, that should just be the series tagline at this point. Oh yeah, we're finally talking about it. Well, I say that, but I briefly mentioned it in the Spelunky 2 segment, New Safe L4, but whatever. I told you One Step from Eden wouldn't be the last roguelike we'd be talking about in this video, but I guess if you saw the thumbnail, then you already knew what was coming next by process of elimination, but shush. So Hades is quite the title in the indie gaming industry. Developed and published by Supergiant Games, released in September 2020, Hades is an action RPG roguelike game, and it's one that's received glowing praise since its release, going on to earn multiple awards, including the Best and Indie and Best Action Game Awards at the Game Awards 2020, and right out of the gate, it deserves all of them. Excuse the profanity for a second here, but Hades is a fucking fantastic game. Once again, taking advantage of the roguelike philosophy and combining it with a fun and frantic hack-and-slash approach to combat, and once again, much like One Step from Eden, Hades is the perfect concoction of addiction. So in Hades, you take control of Zagreus. Yeah, that kinda sends you through a loop, but that being said, Zagreus is the son of Hades, and your objective is to escape the underworld and make it to Olympus. But it's sure no easy feat. Or it could be an easy feat. This is a roguelike after all, so you could end up having a really difficult time, or a really easy one. I'm sure an RNG element like this would be a turn away for most, not being able to plan ahead and whatnot, but to talk about it again, it's the type of RNG that makes for an interesting experience each time, encouraging you to continue on in hopes that you'll succeed the next time through, no matter how many tries it takes. It's replayability incarnate. Throughout your time playing, you may wander upon various gifts bestowed upon Zagreus from the gods of Olympus, the likes of which include Zeus, Aphrodite, Poseidon, Ares, Athena, and so on and so forth. And whose boon is bestowed upon you is, once again, down to RNG, but again, that's what makes Hades fun. One run you could be using the powers of Zeus with your abilities having added lightning strikes to them, or in another run, you can have the powers of Aphrodite, inflicting status like Weep, which reduces the damage that afflicted enemies do by a whole 30%. Goes without saying, but the boons are invaluable to your survival. Of course, being a roguelike, when you die, you are sent right back to the beginning, losing all the abilities and effects you picked up. But with the right mentality, it's a minor setback, a slap on the wrist if you will, because I guarantee you, you'll be ready to go again immediately. It's also worth mentioning that Hades is so full of character as well, with every character being voiced and having their own distinct personality that would be befitting of their respective history. It's all fantastic stuff, and all the voice acting is credible too. The talent of these people is just something else, man. If I had to pick a favourite, probably Megira because of her interactions with Zagreus, given that they are apparently ex-lovers? I don't know, that kind of dynamic in this scenario is just really entertaining to me. Honestly, Hades is always a really hard game for me to put down, even if I do happen to be garbage at it. I think I've found a new favourite genre, and it's the roguelike one. Appropriate enough, too, because, assuming I'm not forgetting anything, Hades was actually the first roguelike I played. Yep, it's been in the back burner for a little while now, but now I've finally gotten the chance to talk about it, and I'm really happy I did. I strongly recommend Hades. Seriously, go play it. It's on Xbox Game Pass, which is how I've played the majority of the games in this series, so if cost is a worry to you, you at least have the opportunity to try it out for free right now. The only thing you'll be losing is time, but time is not wasted if you enjoy that time, and you definitely will enjoy your time with Hades. Ever since I first watched Cadixus's video on spending $1,200 on PS5 related stuff, including games, where Bugsnax was one of the games he talked about, I've had an interest in playing it. However, with it being on the PS5, which is both expensive as hell and about as rare as it is to find a shiny female combi, I really had no easy way of playing it. But just a few days ago, as of writing this, it got ported to other platforms, and so I finally had the chance to play it. Having given you all the context, you may be asking, well, what the hell even is Bugsnax? And to answer that, I'm going to ask you to shut up for a second and allow me to get to that. To summarise it, Bugsnax, developed and published by Young Horses, is similar to Ape Escape, a series of games released on the PS1 that are fairly beloved and debatably underrated. But instead of going around catching apes in various challenging ways, depending on the type of ape, you're going around catching these other little creatures, the titular Bugsnax. And it's these little things alone that you can see the game is brimming with charm. From burger creatures that charge at anything covered in ketchup to tiny strawberry critters to dragonflies that are different kinds of lollipops, there is so much undeniable charm packed into this game, made all the better by the fact that the creatures vocalise their own names much like Pokemon. It's all adorable. And to add on to the overwhelming charm, similar to Ape Escape, in order to catch the Bugsnax, sometimes you'll need to take a certain approach to do so. Take the aforementioned burger creatures, the bungers for example. Normally you can catch these things by simply placing down a trap. Instead, what you have to do is find just a sturdy creature nearby, usually another bunger, splash it with ketchup and wait for them to charge into each other and daze one another, and that's how you capture one. It's this puzzle aspect about Bugsnax that I really love because it gets you thinking and keeps things fresh, no pun intended, throughout, making sure your experience doesn't get stale. Again, no pun intended. I suppose this charm does kind of veil a more subtle, darker aspect about the game where consuming these Bugsnax will transform a certain part of the body into the respective food and the characters to grumbles, just being okay with it as if there were some kind of weird cult, but that's not important. I'm not out here looking to the lore of Bugsnax. Why is everything gotta have lore nowadays? I don't get it. Well anyway, I really enjoyed what I played of Bugsnax. I'm very willing to go back to it to get my cute critter catching fix, if only just to see what new little creatures I come across. I have a similarity to Pokemon where you might be intrigued to see every Pokemon just to see what they look like or whatever. Quite a tonal shift, wouldn't you say? But hey, this is not the first time this has happened in this new save file series. It's about as consistent as this series' upload frequency. That aside, speaking truthfully, out of all the games in this video, Back 4 Blood's probably the game I'd least be likely to play, but that is kind of what the series is about, expanding my horizons is all. But with that said, maybe my reluctancy to play something like Back 4 Blood was a good thing, because, not to say it's a bad game, no, I can totally see why people would enjoy this and why earlier zombie PvE games like Left 4 Dead and its sequel are so beloved, but for me, it's not for me. But my opinion aside for a second, how about some context? Well, developed by Total Rock Studios and published by Warner Bros. Interactive Entertainment, as mentioned in the previous paragraph, Back 4 Blood is a zombie PvE survival game where you and 3 other people will attempt to wipe out hordes of zombies, called the Ridden, in the pretty typical post-apocalyptic zombie plot of retaking lost land. It's nothing groundbreaking in terms of setting, but gameplay-wise, it's truly something else, taking a ton of inspiration from the Left 4 Dead games, which makes sense because a number of the old Left 4 Dead devs also worked on Back 4 Blood, so it's a passion project essentially. But as I was saying, what makes Back 4 Blood so interesting is its AI adaptation system. To put it simply, it's game design that plays around you, e.g., if you're having a hard time, the game will become easier, but if you're having an easy time, the game will get harder. It's a very cool system, honestly. A lot of other games have used a system like this, including the Binding of Isaac. That was a very simple explanation of how the otherwise complex system works, but I'm sure you get the idea. But to get onto my actual experience now, yeah, it was alright. Honestly, there's not too much I could say for what I played, other than for the fact it was all made infinitely better by playing with friends, the boys. And yeah, this type of game with friends is always going to be a blast, but ignoring that for a second, I don't really feel strongly about the game in any way. I guess I enjoyed my time, but overall, I'm pretty so-so on it. It kinda hurts being so indifferent about a hugely popular game, but that's just how it is, I guess. Not everything is for everyone, and I don't think it should be. However, if what you've been seeing, or certain things I've talked about, do appeal to you, then give Back 4 Blood a try. I do generally recommend it, despite how I personally feel about it. My opinion probably won't reflect yours after all. For one game I was pretty indifferent about to one that I've absolutely fallen in love with, Stardew Valley. Developed and published by Concerned Ape, Stardew Valley is a life simulation RPG where you're free to do whatever you want. It takes heavy inspiration from Minecraft in that sense, but what I think is a better example is Animal Crossing. Or at least that's the kind of vibe I got from it. It really made me miss the simpler days when New Leaf first came out, and it was just... man, that was a good summer. Well, more accurately, Concerned Ape was heavily inspired by the Harvest Moon series, which, yeah, sure, is inspired by Animal Crossing in one way or another, so I guess I was kind of right. Okay, I'm rambling, my bad. But anyway, the premise for Stardew Valley is as follows. Desiring more from life, while being stuck in a dead-end job, you open a letter given to you by your grandpa who said to open it only when such an occasion would arise. Doing so, you find you're left a deed to a farm located in Pelican Town, which you soon move to start your life anew. It's a simple but wholesome premise, but where Stardew shines is, well, actually, it shines in a lot of aspects. As mentioned, Stardew was inspired by the Harvest Moon series, so it is, of course, a farming simulation game. And by the way, this happens to be my first farming simulation game, and if this is what that genre is like, then man, I really need to play more farming sim games. Like, for real, tending to your crops and seeing your plot of land progress slowly into a thriving farm is so relaxing and just... nice. It's the perfect kind of escapism for whenever you're stressed, honestly. Something that Animal Crossing used to be for me, and... yeah, it is probably because I missed the good old days of when I was new to Animal Crossing that I've fallen in love with Stardew Valley. To move away from the farming aspect, Stardew also shines in its social aspect. Honestly, if there's anything you've heard about Stardew, including myself, it's the social bonding aspect of the game where you build relationships with the folks of Pelican Town, and in time, you can even choose to marry someone, so long as they're single, of course. There's no cheating here. And no, I haven't gotten that far yet. I'm not even 15 days in, and that's going to take a while. But if you're curious, I've taken an interest in Abigail because I really like her design, so I'm probably going to see how far I can get with her. But hey, things can change, so we'll see. Speaking of character design, well, kind of, I mean how the game looks in general, Stardew is such a pretty looking game. The pixel art really does wonders for this kind of game. It's so pleasing to the eyes and just... oh, it's so beautiful. I love it so much. To really hammer it home on how much I loved my time with Stardew, on average, I'll clip about maybe 20 clips per game for these videos, and while I've gathered at least 30 clips for the majority of games this time around, in Stardew Valley's case, I have around 50 clips, so there you go. And you know, I want to continue playing, and I don't want those other clips to go to waste, so I'll say this. A proper review of Stardew Valley is in the cards. I can't say when yet, but it definitely will be someday. I strongly recommend Stardew Valley if you need something a little more down to earth or a great form of escapism, because it's great for both those things and on its own. Much like I said with A Hat in Time once, I'm disappointed it's taken me this long to play it, over 6 years after it first came out, but I'm glad I finally have. When it comes to video game genres, it can be argued that no particular one is as satisfying to progress in than a Metroidvania. But there's a chance you don't know what a Metroidvania even is, so allow me. To quote Wikipedia here, Metroidvania is a subgenre of action-adventure video games focused on guided non-linearity and utility-gated exploration and progression. So, in other words, there's a strong, genuine feeling of progression and growth. Also, the name Metroidvania is a combination of the Metroid and Castlevania titles, series that were the birthplace of what the Metroidvania subgenre has become known for. with other games in the subgenre including the Shantae line of games, the Ori series, and today's topic, Hollow Knight. Developed and published by Team Cherry, Hollow Knight has you take control of this little thing known as the Knight, and your task is to wipe the hollowness of its infection that has taken over the residents' minds, by unlocking the seals to a temple door that houses the source of said infection. As expected, similar to other Metroidvanias, you have to explore a humongous landscape to find new abilities that can help you progress, and defeat many bosses along the way, as you try to fight the infection. You'd probably be surprised to hear me say that Hollow Knight was not actually my first Metroidvania experience. That, in fact, was Guacamelee, years ago, and since then I have played others, including the legendary Super Metroid and Castlevania Symphony of the Night themselves, games that I haven't exactly finished, but I did have fun with because of the Metroidvania game design, and Hollow Knight is no different at all. For real, I had a blast playing Hollow Knight for the first time, from the sense of exploration to so far simple but fun combat, and the overall atmosphere that the game gives off. Seriously, this game is dark and dingy looking, and honestly quite depressing, but somehow, despite the numerous negative connotations that come with that description, it's honestly intriguing to me in a way that makes me want to save the place from its misery, you know? And speaking of misery, this game is difficult, no two ways about it. It's not like I struggled too much with what I did play, but with where I slipped up and such, the lingering feeling of knowing the game will get harder loomed in the back of my mind, which, okay, I only know because of reviews I've seen in the past, namely Some Call Me Johnny's, but still. However, my lack of ability to play most video games while aside, I did like the sense of challenge the game offered, and that's another thing that intrigues me to go on, to see if I can overcome the obstacles, and I've just been unnecessarily doubting myself. The mark of a gratifying sense of challenge. I had fun with Hollow Knight, a lot of fun, more than I was expecting honestly. That's not to say I was expecting to have an awful time, because I did expect to enjoy it to a degree, given my past experience with Metroidvania titles, especially Shantae Half Genie Hero, which I haven't all mentioned anyway here, but I thought it was fantastic, so there you go. And having said that, I went on to really enjoy Hollow Knight, so lack of segue notwithstanding, Hollow Knight is a fantastic game, so here's hoping my mediocre gaming skills can overcome it someday.